In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Dear audience, I am Dr. Khurram Shehzad from National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. Today I am going to talk about syntax. Students have been asking me that I should also talk about syntax. So, syntax means syntactic structures. Syntax means that we are going to look at that how sentences, in fact clauses, they are formed. It is an introductory lecture where I will be talking about some of the misconceptions as well. So, I am going to follow understanding syntax, and in this book, the author also talks about some of the misconceptions. The very first, misconception that usually people they talk about is that they think that syntax and grammar they are one and the same thing. Remember, syntax deals with syntactic structures. Syntax deals with how structures they are formed. On the other hand, grammar is a bigger term. In grammar, we have got phonology, that how phonologically people they produce, sentences. Grammar involves syntax also. Grammar involves morphology also. And grammar, of course, talks about semantics as well. So there are four things that one can find in grammar, that is phonetics, semantics, syntax, and phonology or morphology. And this is how grammar is formed. So, something when somebody is producing it, it should have a syntactic structure, it should have clear meanings, and of course, when the phonetic form it is involved and people they utter those sentences, so that is complete grammar. And if any one element is missing, for example, if the structure is lopsided, if sometimes the people they are starting with object and then there is subject and then there is verb, so it means that that sentence it does not have a structure, so that is not grammar. And sometimes when people say that sentences they are well formed but they do not have any meaning, so again it is not grammar. So grammar revolves around four things: phonetics, syntactic structures, syntax, semantics, and morphology. On the other hand, syntax is just one part of grammar. It deals with syntactic structures. Well, dear audience, we have got syntactic theory in syntax. We have different kinds of grammar: traditional grammar, prescriptive grammar, descriptive grammar, structural grammar, and traditional grammar. Syntax means sentence construction, how words group together to make phrases and sentences. On the other hand, morphology deals with the structure of words, that how words they are formed. Some people also use the term grammar to mean the same as syntax, but this is not the case so, and I have just explained this thing to you. In syntax, we will come across some of the other ideas like noun phrase, verb phrase, adjectival phrase, and how they work within the sentence. Now the question arises that why is it important to deal with syntax or to study syntax? Remember, Chomsky has given the idea of universal grammar. In universal grammar, Chomsky talks about that all languages of the world they have got certain attributes, they have got certain elements, and these elements are universal. For example, I know Urdu language, I know Punjabi language, I know English, and I know some of the other languages, but I don't know all the languages of the world. But when we read different kinds of books, there are people they will be talking about French language, there are people they will be talking about Spanish language, there are people who will be talking about German language, so Arabic language. And when we read these languages separately, we come across the concepts of subject, verb, or object. We come across the concept of complement. So one can find noun phrases, verb phrases, adjectival phrases, or adverbial phrases in all languages of the world. So these concepts are universal. That is why we say that syntax is important, because syntax will tell us that how these nouns and verbs, how these verbs and adverbs or nouns and adjectives, they will be combined together to create sentences which have got meanings. In this syntactic structures class, remember, we are not dealing with traditional grammar. Traditional grammar is quite often prescriptive in nature. It will tell you that whether you should say you and he, or I and you, or you and I, or where you should say me and you, or you and me, such type of things. It will say that what is the difference between different from or different to. These things we are not going to deal with in syntax, because our job is to find out the syntactic structures of the language, and particularly of English language, that how these syntactic structures, and syntactic structures, they are made up of constituents. So noun phrase is one constituent, verb phrase is another constituent, adverb phrase is other constituent, or prepositional phrase, it is another constituent. And there is a way, there is always some method which will tell us that how these phrases, they will be combined together to generate clauses and later on bigger sentences. Therefore, it is important that we should study syntax, because it will guide us that how languages they work, how languages they produce sentences, and of course, with the help of these sentences, we in fact produce messages. And in this way, communication goes on. Remember, traditional grammar focuses on correctness. It focuses on linguistic purism. It talks about literary excellence. And traditional grammar will try to bring, Latin rules and regulations into the English language and will ask you to follow these rules. On the other hand, in syntax, we are not going to talk about or deal with such type of rules and regulations, but we will definitely be talking about rules, because syntactic structures, they have got certain rules, and these structures, they are produced because of those rules, and rules are limited in number, but the kind of sentences that we are producing, they are unlimited in number. Human beings, when they come into this world, till the age of 7, they learn, they acquire their language. And of course, the language, it resides in our mind. Consciously or unconsciously, we have acquired our first language. And here we are talking about syntax. Here we are talking about that how syntax will tell us that different kinds of constituents, different kinds of phrases, they will be combined together to produce clauses and sentences. There will be people, they will be following standard English. Remember, it is not necessary, and we should not make fun of those people. Those, they have got their own regional dialects. There is no logic involved. And understanding syntax gives examples from the standard English as well as from regional dialects to tell us that this is not the case, that we can say this is superior language and this is inferior language. It is the choice of a person that how he or she chooses to speak. It is the kind of formal education that the people have got. Accordingly, the people are supposed to speak the language. It is said that English does not have double negative. In the past, if we read about Middle English, English does have double negatives. And then it is said that double negative means something which is positive. But then understanding syntax gives the example of a double negative saying, I did not do nothing wrong. I did not do nothing wrong. Of course, people will say that this is not correct sentence. But There is nothing wrong with this sentence. Here, it does not mean that I did not do nothing wrong, that I did something right or I did something wrong. It never means that I did something wrong. On the other hand, he gives the example from French language saying that French language also has got double negatives. Then understanding syntax talks about tag questions. I'm not here, am I am doing this work, aren't I am doing this work. The tag question should be am I not, am I not. But in spoken English, people cannot say amn't, so they bring the helping verb which is used with you, and they say aren't I. It should not be read as aren't I, which is wrong. Aren't I. But basically, if we write it, it is are not I. Formal English will say here are not, aren't I is correct. On the other hand, our teachers and in the books that we read, no one will say that are should be used with I. So it means that there is no logic in language. It is just that how people they are making use of language, they are speaking these sentences and they are making use of this language in the context or in their society. In my today's class, I have introduced what is syntax, what is the difference between syntax and grammar, and I have talked about some of the misconceptions that people usually have. So in our next class we will be talking about some of the other concepts of syntax. Thank you very much.